Okay, let's dive into this. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our latest explainer. I am so thrilled you're joining me today because, we're looking at something that fundamentally shapes the future of a whole nation, and that is immigration. If you're a focused learner trying to map out global mobility, or honestly, if you're just fascinated by how countries manage their borders and talent pools, you are in exactly the right place. Today, our goal is to completely demystify Australia's 2026 to 2027 migration rules. We're looking right at the numbers, the policy shifts, and the new administrative realities that are going to literally impact hundreds of thousands of lives. I want you to just sit with a number for a second. 185,000. It's a highly specific figure, right? But it represents the absolute macro scale of our entire topic today. This is the exact number of permanent migration places Australia has officially made available for the 2026 to 27 program year. That is the quota. It's a hard ceiling. Every single policy tweak, every visa cap, and every fee increase we're about to discuss today operates entirely underneath this massive umbrella of 185,000 available permanent places. Now, this can be a lot of dense, bureaucratic information, but don't worry, I'll be your guide through it all. We're going to logically break this down into 5 key areas: the big migration picture, focusing on skilled talent, international student caps, the cost of relocating, and finally, streamlining the visa process. All right, let's start with Section 1, the big migration picture. Before we drill down into the really granular details of specific visas, we've got to understand how Australia is approaching its current domestic landscape. Government policy doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? It responds to what's happening on the ground in real time. And the Australian government is making a very distinct policy choice right now. They're prioritizing onshore applicants, meaning they're favoring people who are already physically inside Australia. The specific, stated policy rationale for this is really twofold: easing housing pressures and managing net overseas migration pressures. By focusing on folks already in the country, the government aims to hand out permanent residency without instantly adding new demand to the current housing market, or, spiking those net arrival numbers. It's basically a highly calculated balancing act between granting permanent status and managing their domestic infrastructure. Which brings us right to Section 2, focusing on skilled talent. So, if the government has a strict cap of 185,000 permanent places, and they're seriously factoring in domestic pressures like housing, we have to ask ourselves, who exactly are they looking for to fill those incredibly valuable spots? And this brilliantly illustrates exactly who they want: a massive 70-30 split favoring skilled migrants. Literally, a full 70% of that 185,000 permanent program quota is strictly dedicated to skilled talent, leaving just 30% for all other migration categories. If you're a global professional, say an engineer, a healthcare worker, or a tech specialist mapping out your future down under, this breakdown is everything. It reinforces visually just how heavily this program favors specific skill sets that contribute directly to the Australian economy. Moving right along to Section 3, international student caps. We know the professional landscape, but what about the educational one? For all the international students watching this explainer right now, you're probably wondering, are Australia's doors still open to me for study? The short answer is yes, but it is strictly regulated. The international student cap is remaining fixed at 295,000 places for the year 2027. By holding this number steady, the government is essentially providing a highly stable ceiling for the whole Australian education sector. It allows universities and vocational institutions to properly plan their intakes, while, again, allowing the government to manage those overarching net migration numbers we talked about a minute ago. So it is a very clear, hard boundary. Let's move to and see how this builds as we enter Section 4, the cost of relocating. We've talked about the macro quotas, right? The hundreds of thousands of people moving through the system. Now we need to transition down to the micro level and look at the actual out-of-pocket financial realities for prospective migrants applying for these visas. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer disparity in these updated application fees. I mean, look at the sticker shock on that final figure. If you're applying for a standard student visa, the cost is 2,500 Australian dollars. Once you graduate and want to stay and work, the temporary graduate visa, that's Subclass 485, jumps up to 5,750 AUD. But then, the partner visa. The cost to apply for a partner visa has increased to a massive 11,710 AUD. Contrasting that sharply with the student and graduate visa costs really hits home the intense financial commitment required to migrate to Australia, particularly if you're trying to bring a spouse or partner along with you. And finally, we arrive at Section 5, streamlining the visa process. Look, knowing the quotas and knowing the financial costs is really only half the battle. To successfully navigate this environment, you absolutely have to understand the granular administrative changes to how you actually lodge your application. So the crucial point is that the application system is becoming highly specific and incredibly digitized. Let's rapid fire through these procedural updates. First up, parent visas. Online lodgement through the ImmiAccount portal is now officially available for several parent categories, which is great because it modernizes that whole pathway. Second, if you're looking at training visas, Subclass 407, the rules are stricter now. You absolutely must wait for your sponsor and nomination approvals to come through before you can validly lodge your application. And lastly, for the Work and Holiday Subclass 462 visas, the process is now being managed through specialized ballot registration windows for select countries. Specifically, they've been operating recent intake windows for applicants from China, India, and Vietnam. The whole system is just getting tighter, more organized, and way more heavily digitized. Wow, we have covered a lot of ground today, looking purely at the data and policy updates the government has provided. We've seen a strict cap of 185,000 permanent places. We've seen a really heavy 70% preference for skilled onshore applicants. We've explored fixed student numbers, deeply digitized application processes, and application fees jumping to nearly $12,000 for families. These are, without a doubt, highly restrictive yet highly targeted policies. So I want to leave you with this provocative final thought. With rising costs and strictly targeted caps, who will ultimately make